Okay, Oscar nuts. We are just days away from the Academy Awards, and we've all just suddenly changed our predictions for Best Picture to The Revenant in this last-minute stampede that I'm not sure is wise. Paul Sheehan, are we going off a cliff here because we're picking The Revenant because BAFTA did right, but BAFTA was wrong last year? So what's going on here?
I don't know. I mean, all five of us, Chris Beachum, Daniel Montgomery, Marcus Dixon, our editors, Tom, and me, executive editor, we're all saying The Revenant. We're all saying Inarritu. I think we first got, I switched when Inarritu made history at the DGA by winning back-to-back. And that was a big surprise. We were sort of predicting George Miller for the most part. I think you, Tom, were saying we were wrong on that, and it was going to be Inarritu, so you knew that. And there's a big correlation between Best Director and Best Picture at the Oscars. Then this preferential ballot, which they introduced when they expanded the Best Picture race, screwed things up because it was no longer a popular vote on Best Picture, it was ranking. And I was still not sure it was going to be Revenant, but then we saw BAFTA fall into line behind it, and that is a popular vote. So Revenant won the popular vote at BAFTA. Now, it was only a 5-picture field. So I'm saying Revenant, but I'm not wholly confident in it. Who is? Which one of you three, Daniel, Chris, Marcus, is the most confident that it's going to be Revenant to win Best Picture? Nobody's saying anything.
It's still, I mean, you know, I know we're all in the same picture now with Revenant, but Spotlight is right there. Big Short is right there. Mad Max is going to win the most Oscars. It's still a fun year. Everything kind of crystallized for me. It wasn't BAFTA alone, like you said, Paul. It was BAFTA and DGA together. I think, back to back. Really, the only thing still holding on in my mind on Big Short is PGA, which has been 8 years in a row where they've been right, but. And last year, after I went against PGA and went Boyhood, I said I would never do that again, and here I am doing it again.
Yeah, and then so with PGA, I mean, they use that same preferential ballot the Oscars does. They had a field of 10. They have about 6,000 voters. The Academy has about that. Tom, why did The Revenant not win PGA if it's going to win Best Picture at the Oscars?
That is the most pressing question of all, of course, and my best guess is that the support for Revenant didn't really crest until probably 5 to 10 days after they voted there. Yes, the voting went on all the way up to PGA. Yes, Revenant had opened in theaters at Christmas time, and of course was showing in screenings rooms across Hollywood and elsewhere to the industry, and these PGA members are industry people who would have seen it there. But I think the collective buzz, I think the kind of general approbation and support for the film coalesced afterwards. And I think they responded, all these money people, to a movie about money. I think that had a lot to do with it. And I think that had the vote been placed a week later, we may have seen a different result.
But now that's interesting you say about money, because I think that my thinking about why The Revenant didn't win might be the opposite, in that it was over budget, $135 million, months and months delayed in the shooting. And I mean, if it hadn't been, it reminds me of Titanic in that it could have been Inarritu's folly. Like, Tom, you remember before Titanic came out, and everyone was ready to write that off, that it was going to sink the studio, it was the last picture Cameron would ever make. And that thing took hold at the box office and then swept through the Oscars. But I wonder, with the PGA, did they not think it was well produced? That the budgets went overboard, and for The Revenant, that the director was given too much latitude.
Well, Chris, give us your Brad Pitt theory.
Well, I did ask somebody that's involved in all of this a couple of weeks ago, what do you think the reason was the Big Short won PGA? And he said, well, producers just love this Plan B. They love Brad Pitt and Dee Dee Gardner and Jeremy Kleiner. And later in the evening, a few hours after he said that, I thought, I don't know if that's a plus for me staying with the PGA winner then, because if that was sort of a producer's thing, a producer's love, is that going to translate? I know it did on 12 years, but that was a different story. I don't know if it's going to translate across the whole academy. Do they have that kind of love for Plan B?
Daniel, it's just the year we're going to find out what idiots Gold Derby's predictors are across the board, because whatever happens, I think we're going to look foolish. In other words, if it is Revenant, we didn't figure it out until 14 days before the Oscars, and we were starting to predict in late August of last year. We got Leo right, we got Brie Larson right, assuming they come through on Oscar night. I think we all will. So we were very prescient on some things, but on Best Picture, we really blew it. If it's Revenant, we didn't get it until the last 2 weeks, and we had to have it hammered over our head after it won the Golden Globe, after it won DGA, after it won BAFTA. Then we go, oh, okay, it's going to be the Revenant. If it's Spotlight, then we are all the more shameful, because we had Spotlight #1 all year up until the Revenant. There was a period about a month ago where Revenant and Spotlight were tied in the expert predictions, and then Spotlight pulled ahead. Well, what would happen if Spotlight did win? Then, quite frankly, we had it and we dropped it. That really looks stupid. And then The Big Short, we never had The Big Short out front for Best Picture at #1. If that ends up winning, then we missed the boat entirely. So we can't win, can we, Daniel?
Not really, but I mean, all we could do is read the tea leaves that we have in front of us. We understand how this works, and how it works has sort of broken apart this year, because we have this unprecedented, not just one circumstance, but unprecedented lists of circumstances. I mean, the reason we were, a lot of us at least, I certainly was, not necessarily discounting The Revenant, but sort of keeping it lower, being very conservative about whether it could win, was the fact that Iñárritu just won last year, and Birdman just won last year, and if he wins Best Picture and Director again, that would be 5 Oscars in 2 years for him, and that seemed unlikely. It still seems kind of unlikely, even though most of us are predicting it to happen. Big Short is not the kind of film that would normally take hold at the Oscars, but it won the Producers Guild. Spotlight seemed early on like it was going to go all the way, but then it only won SAG, which is the least reliable predictor of those major guilds. And then you had this weird split where the Directors Guild and BAFTA both chose The Revenant, and the Producers Guild chose The Big Short. That particular split has never happened before. When the BAFTA awards and the DGA awards agree, PGA is always right there going along with them. So this is the first time we've seen that kind of split. And then, the last time BAFTA, PGA, and DGA were all wrong was when they all picked Brokeback Mountain and Crash won. So that could be good news for Spotlight. So really, it's a matter of all the tea leaves we have, all the indicators that we have. A big chunk of them are going to be wrong no matter what wins.
Marcus, isn't it more appropriate actually to just admit defeat and say we're idiots?
We have 9 days until the Oscars, which means I'm going to change my mind 9 different times. Today it's The Revenant. Tomorrow it's Star Wars. It's not even nominated, but it's the best movie of the year. So Star Wars is Best Picture, according to me. I did a little research this morning about all of the Guild nominations, just to see, because we always say, Big Short doesn't have support from the branches. Is that true? It actually got nominated at 6 guilds. It got the producers, the directors, the actors, the writers, the editors. Those are the main 5. Sorry. It also got a makeup hair nomination, which is, they have a contemporary category, so that makes sense. But a lot of other contemporary movies didn't get that. Spotlight didn't get that. So that kind of shows that there is a little bit of support from the guilds. And by the way, last year Boyhood also got 6 guild nominations at 6 different guilds. It got the main 5, and it also got costumes. So if we're saying Big Short has the same amount as Boyhood, that means it probably won't win. Birdman last year had 11 guild nominations. It didn't get the 12th one. It didn't get Writers Guild because it was actually ineligible there. It probably would have got all 12. So if we're looking at what got the most, and Paul, I was just copying the scorecard you wrote a couple weeks ago. That was Mad Max. It got, I think, 10 or 9, and then The Revenant got 8. So I mean, if you just go on guild, it's going to be Mad Max or Revenant, and I think we're counting out Mad Max because it doesn't have the heart, like Tom always says. It doesn't have, it's kind of a guy's guy movie. It doesn't feel like an Oscar movie. The Revenant does.
I don't know.
There off of what Marcus and Daniel were. Back to your question. Would people rather us make changes along the way as we were reading these tea leaves, or would they rather us just put something down in August or September and defiantly say, I'm going to stick with that no matter what? I mean, I think they would rather, and I'm sure everybody out there that's voting, predicting with us, would rather look at things as they're happening, and you can see that the Producers Guild was this weekend and not 4 or 5 weeks ago. I think it was the first major guild, wasn't it? The first major award after Globes. I think they would be choosing The Revenant right now. I really do.
And Spotlight, in case you're curious, Spotlight only got 4 guilds. It got producers, directors, actors, and writers. It didn't even get editors.
Right.
And then you have the whole weirdness with, the fact that The Revenant didn't get the ensemble nomination at SAG. The last time that happened was Braveheart, the film that won Best Picture without that nomination. It doesn't have a screenplay nomination. That no film has won Best Picture without that since Titanic. So even if The Revenant wins, as we're all predicting, we all still read it wrong because something was just off along the way, everywhere, with every single contender.
Good. Well, at least we have our excuses now. That's the most important thing. We could plan. Option B could be that we really just are stupid, but it's made for a fun year. What my one problem is, Ben, this year is that while it's been clear that we didn't really know what was out front, we weren't successful in moving our predictions around to reflect the craziness of the race. In other words, go back a few years ago when Argo won. That had actually led our predictions a couple times in September, October, November, and then dropped and then came back. So we had it at one point and then lost it and stuff. But we were slavishly in that spotlight camp all year, and I think probably because journalists were leading the way here at Gold Derby, and journalists saw a movie that they liked about journalism, and that may have clouded our vision too.
Well, no, I do think, Tom, with almost 90 years of Oscar history behind us, and I don't know, that we should be too hard on ourselves for not thinking that Revenant and Birdman, that Inarritu was about to make Oscar history by directing 2 back-to-back Best Picture winners. I mean, it's that's never been done. I mean, the greats of Hollywood could never do it, and he's certainly a modern-day great, but. I'm not going to feel too bad to sort of take my Oscar history into hand and sort of think, well, no.
It usually plays out. If you're relying on history, I mean, early on, even when we saw Eddie Redmayne, we all said, and I think most people were saying that had seen it, not that the performance is incredible, but it just rarely happens that you get a back-to-back acting winner. So we were all saying, yeah, it's great, but I just don't know if he's going to be able to do this thing back-to-back no matter what. So usually history does pan out.
Right, and then conversely, that maybe he could have, but for the fact that DiCaprio's never won. Now that's become the narrative. So.
Well, a Danish Girl needed. I think it was going to have to get into like that Forrest Gump category of, yeah, Hanks had won the year before, but now he's in the Best Picture frontrunner. So it made it even more likely that he was going to win again. Danish Girl, didn't get those major nominations like Eddie needed to make it back to back.
Daniel did something fun the other day and looked at what the experts had as locks, different categories, and which was the biggest lock. But separate and apart from DiCaprio never having won, and as Tom would say, they always slap the stud. I'm curious why is Brie Larson been a lock since Room screened at the festivals? Right, Daniel, didn't she, all 25 experts are saying she's going to win, but I think she's never really had any competition. Tom, what do you explain that?
I think she was just very fortunate that no contender emerged to unseat her. We thought, of course, Jennifer Lawrence had the possibility of doing that with Joy. The movie just wasn't well received, unfortunately, and so there hasn't been that strong a rival, and she had such amazing buzz out of Toronto that it was kind of hard to catch up with her. And let's explain too that she fits the Academy mold very well for for winners, the ingenues that they love to crown. They know this woman. She was in a movie called Short Term 12 a couple years ago that was written by a student who had won an Academy Fellowship. And then all of us in this Oscar community were given private screenings of that, and there were events. The Academy was very proud to show that their foundation money was going toward this quality of screenwriting. And by the way, that movie also had Rami Malek in it, which was Mr. Robot. It spawned quite a few major stars, and she was terrific in the film. So in a way, everybody in the Oscar world kind of knew her, and that was important for now accepting her in this big way. And besides, Room is such a powerful film. I think you really feel the terror that character endures effectively. So she had all the right elements, and she's not too pretty. She's pretty, but not too pretty. She won't be a Charlize Theron kind of thing where Charlize was too pretty, and I don't think that's helped her get serious roles. Brie may have a real film career ahead of her. Movies that matter.
And she's in the Best Picture nominee and a Best Directed nominee as well, so that definitely helps.
Right. Let me go through all of you here and just get your prediction for, BAFTA was wrong last year about Best Picture. Let's presume for a moment it's wrong again. And if it's not Revenant, what is Best Picture winner? Marcus, we go to you, then Paul, then Daniel, then Chris. What's the number 2 placed winner if it's not Revenant?
Well, the industry is telling us it's Mad Max because that has more support from more guilds than anything else except for The Revenant. But I just can't get over the PGA, the preferential ballot, going with Big Short. So I think if Revenant loses, it's Big Short.
Paul?
Yeah, I agree with everything Marcus just said.
Daniel?
Wow.
Yeah, it's. I think it's obviously Big Short would be that runner-up spot. Not just because of the PGA, but because of all. It ticked all those necessary boxes that it's the only one that on paper looks like it should win, with the screenwriting nominations, the editing nominations, the SAG Ensemble nomination. It has hit everywhere it has needed to hit. Were it not for this Revenant suddenly taking over at DGA and BAFTA, I'd still be with the Big Short. So yeah, I think it still has a shot, a very good shot actually. So if it's not the Revenant, I think it's definitely Big Short.
Chris?
Yeah, I agree. I would go with the PGA winner. But backing up to something Marcus said, I've told people this for years, and we've had discussions about this. But Mad Max and Revenant to an extent, they have you can't go by guild numbers because Spotlight and Big Short were not going to get in for visual effects or sound or makeup or costume design. They have an inherent disadvantage there amongst most of the guilds. Just because, let's say I'm a member of the Visual Effects Guild and I may vote Mad Max Best Visual Effects for the year, doesn't mean I don't think Big Short isn't the best picture of the year. We sometimes lump people together in their groups and say, well, if they're a visual effects person, they're going to vote for a visual effects movie. Not necessarily at all.
I would just want to jump in and give a shout out to Daniel because he wrote a really interesting piece the other day. Would we be taking Big Short more seriously in Best Picture if it was directed by someone else? I mean, Adam McKay's history is in comedies, and it's sort of interesting, isn't it, Daniel? Imagine if Inarritu had done Big Short and Adam McKay had done The Revenant, would this be a different conversation we're having?
Yes, very interesting point. It would be a different conversation.
It's like Tom has mentioned before with the last film that had this many, not these specific exact 5 nominations for best, was and one Best Picture was The Departed, and that had the Martin Scorsese factor. So, and true, Martin Scorsese did direct kind of a similar film, The Wolf of Wall Street, that didn't win. But I feel like this year, with this, if this exact same movie had the name Martin Scorsese on it instead of Adam McKay, it would be the easy Best Picture winner.
It feels like a Scorsese film, too. It feels like kind of The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah. All right, here's my question for each of you guys. We're all in it to win it here. We want the best score, so we may not be making Daredevil predictions, but what Daredevil prediction do you want to make? What are you really tempted to defy the collective view and go for it? And I want you to talk me out of, I'm now leaning very strongly to going back toward Kate Winslet for supporting actress.
That's mine, Tom. That's mine. That's the same way.
All right, here's my theory, Paul, all right? And let's call it the Wendy rule, your friend Wendy, all right? Who's an actress in in New York. And Wendy, if you're watching this, please don't be insulted, but I think you'll see where I'm going with this theory. We had heard from Tarek Khan, Ralph Galvin, and myself that every single SAG voter that we had talked to was voting for Winslet. And then Paul and I had a contretemps at one point, and he said, well, I was talking to Wendy, and her SAG, she's an actress in New York, and her SAG friend says everyone's voting for Alicia Vikander. And I went, the hell with that, I'm going with my things. Well, when Alicia ended up winning, I started thinking, all right, well, let's accept the voting information and the intelligence we got as true from all these sources. What's the difference? The difference would be that the people that I'm talking to here in LA and these Academy members and stuff that Tarek have been talking to are all the more kind of industry stating. What the crowd that Wendy's talking to are more the trendoid, the actor types, of which there are 116,000 in SAG, of course. There are only 6,000 Oscar voters. So maybe the trendoid vote went for Alicia Vikander because she's the cool cat. Does that necessarily mean the Oscar voter? And I'm tempted to think that they've got their ingenue. They've got Brie Larson on their ballot, the voters. They always want to crown an ingenue. But do they want to crown two? Anyway, so that's my argument, Paul. What's your response to that? And then give me your thought on this race about Kate's possibility.
Well, this is where I fall victim to, of course, my personal preference, because I just thought she was the heart and soul of Steve Jobs, Kate Winslet. So I would be so thrilled for her to win. And having won at BAFTA, where she didn't have to contend with Vikander, who'd been bumped up to lead. And my only concern is, of course, that the lead masquerading as a supporting role is such an effective way to win that category. With I think of Jennifer Connelly and
right, but come on, Kate Winslet is the female lead of Steve Jobs too.
Yeah, sure. But not to the same degree as the Danish Girl. Vikander, in fact, at one point is referred to as the Danish Girl. So it's one of my. I'd love to have the guts to predict Winslet to win, and that she actually does win. But I don't think I will in the end. I think I'll stick.
What do you think of my Wendy theory and how I broke it down?
I think you're absolutely right.
Okay, then I'm going to go for it. Look, Kate Winslet won the Globe in BAFTA, right? I realize that the Danish Girl, Alicia Vikander, BAFTA was set off into a different category. Go ahead, Marcus.
One thing to keep in mind is that both of the times Winslet won, Steve Jobs, the screenplay, was nominated. So it just tells you that those organizations liked Steve Jobs more. It's not up at the Oscars. And then, of course, everyone's talking about the Vikander Danish Girl thing. Both times Winslet won, Danish Girl was in lead.
And the last time this particular split happened was Lupita Nyong'o and Jennifer Lawrence. Golden Globe and BAFTA went to Lawrence. Critics' Choice and SAG went to Nyong'o. Nyong'o won the Oscar. And in that case, they were going head-to-head every time. So in this case, the only times Kate Winslet has been able to win was when Alicia Vikander's Danish Girl performance was in the lead category. So I think if anyone beats Vikander, it's going to be Winslet. And if Winslet hadn't won 8 years ago for The Reader, 7, 8 years ago for The Reader, she'd probably be the front runner now because she'd still be so overdue. Kate Winslet has never beaten Alicia Vikander head-to-head for the Danish Girl. Vikander has beaten Winslet twice. When she's up against her Steve Jobs performance with the Danish Girl. So, Winslet could upset, but I have no desire to switch to her personally.
And we're sitting here talking, and I can't help thinking, poor Rooney Mara. I mean, she's got that Best Actress win from Cannes. I mean, Tom, is this an instance where if she had been campaigned up in lead, that she might have been nominated over Cate Blanchett in lead, at least have gotten a Best Actress nomination again, like she did for Girl with Dragon Tattoo?
No, I think something else has happened here. I think that her cool cat buzz that she had during Dragon Tattoo days has worn off. I've been shocked traveling to media circles, asking people, just making the assumption, like a lot of the journalists did making predictions of Gold Derby, that of course she was going to be out front, and for a big chunk of the year, in Gold Derby she was. But then when you got on the ground and started talking to people, that love for Rooney is not there. It used to be there, and she could probably get it back, but I was surprised that it had vanished.
Huh. Also, she doesn't die in the movie. The Oscars only like gay characters when they die horrible deaths. And, you know, her and Cate Blanchett, they're lesbian lovers, but they both live at the end.
That's right. The nerve of surviving. Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
So Chris, do you have a maybe go out on a limb kind of a prediction that you might make?
I'm looking down the list, and I'm so chalk, to use a sports term. I would say I do think Kate does have a shot there at supporting actress. The only category
you got to go back and explain that. I don't think you're using a sports term for people that don't get that. What does that mean?
I don't know where it came from, but when you go chalk, it's just predicting the favorites, just predicting the favorites. They usually look quite a lot like in a basketball tournament or something, where you just pick the better seed over the worst seed. The only category, Marcus and I were chatting about this the other day, that I feel kind of strongly about, that I'm way against the grain, is score. Everybody's got Hateful Eight. They have not put the word out, I think, effectively that Morricone has never won an Oscar. I think they really, I don't know that he would have done interviews or anything, but I just think they really could have gotten the word out like we've seen on other, like John Hamm last year at the Emmys, or when we really helped get the word out about Bob Newhart a couple of years ago. Star Wars, to me, that's the category that it really could win. It's John Williams' 50th, not that they know that, but he hasn't won in over 20 years. And the big thing for me is you're going to have all these voters in like their 30s, 40s, 50s that are going to be nostalgic about the original Star Wars score. Not that this one's a whole lot different from that, but I just have this feeling that that's going to do it for him, that alone.
Yeah, Morricone did win the BAFTA, though, right? So
he did win at BAFTA. He won the Golden Globe. He's got that honorary Oscar from several years ago. And I could totally see him winning this, and it wouldn't. I would love it. I'd love when an older person like that wins their first Oscar. But I've had this thinking all along about John Williams winning here, and I think it's the one limb I'm going out on.
I think with John Williams, I wonder if he might be sort of like the Meryl Streep of that category, where people, because he's nominated every year or every other year.
Every project, yeah.
So people probably just assume he has won a lot, and a lot more recently than he has. It's only when you do the research that you're sort of surprised, oh, he hasn't won since Schindler's List. And out of 50 nominations, he's won a relatively small number. Only 5 of those 50 nominations has he won for arguably the greatest living film composer.
I just think they're not going to look up, they're not going to do any research to know it's his 50th or the Schindler's List or any of that. I just think the nostalgia of, most people think Star Wars, the original, the score was one of the best scores they've ever heard, and I think he's going to get credit for that now, even though he won the Oscar for Star Wars.
This is the original score over and over and over again. There's not
I
a lot
don't
of
personally believe it really ought to be eligible, especially if you're going to knock out things like the Revenant's score or last year Birdman. But it is, and he's there, so I think it's going to be very tempting.
I mentioned before Star Wars is my favorite movie. I wouldn't even predict it for score. I would have it in third place. If I was an Oscar voter, I would have Hateful Eight and then Carol second.
What about visual effects, Daniel? Because that might be an out on a limb kind of prediction. Where the odds at Gold Derby are saying Mad Max.
Yeah, I'm going out on a limb with Jack Matthews, one of our experts. I'm saying The Revenant right now. I might, by the time the Oscars roll around, play it safe and go back to Mad Max, but I'm not even sure that is playing it safe, because Best Visual Effects has, over the years, really been the picture we like the most that has visual effects in it. If there's a Best Picture nominee in the running, it always wins or almost always wins, going back to things like Forrest Gump and Gladiator pulling off upsets, Hugo pulling off an upset against Rise of the Planet of the Apes. And in this case, we have 3 Best Picture nominees. But if we're all now saying that Revenant is the one to beat for Best Picture and it's going to win Best Director, even if it doesn't win Best Picture, it'll probably win Best Director. I just don't know that The Revenant is going to give up all those technical nominations to Mad Max. And I think visual effects, another factor is that 5 out of the last 6 years, visual effects has gone to the same film that won cinematography, which makes me think that voters who aren't technically inclined are sort of equating the film that looks good, has the best effects and cinematography, so they vote for it in both. And it's Revenant is a near lock for cinematography, so all of that is making me think that maybe The Revenant over Mad Max and even over Star Wars, which just won BAFTA, it's a tough one. I'm not super confident about it, but it just feels kind of right.
Interesting.
I told somebody the other day, I think it might have been Marcus, if you just think about all the movies you saw this past year, especially visual effects related, what was the single most memorable effect of the year? Like one scene, and I think it's the bear scene from The Revenant. It's the only one where they finished, and I'm sitting in my seat going, how in the world did they do that?
Yeah, I agree, Chris, but you don't think of it as special effects.
No, I agree. I'm not picking that.
You think of it as real, and that they used a stuntman, or you think of all these other things.
If voters have that in their mind, I know this isn't a visual effects movie, but wow, that bear scene was great. They might vote for it.
Marcus, back to you. What's what long shot are you tempted to bet on?
It's actually this category, visual effects, Star Wars. I think I'm the only one, is that right, going for Star Wars? But you guys are ignoring the Guild. The Guild gave it 4 trophies.
Yeah, no, I have Star Wars out there right now, but then they gave 3 trophies to The Revenant too, remember?
Right, that's true.
You know, in almost every year in every category, if you're struggling, not a category like, let's say like Stallone and supporting actor, where that's the only nomination for the film, if you're struggling in a category to determine who the winner is, you usually go with a Best Picture nominee.
But this year is different.
We lost Marcus.
The internet is rejecting his theory.
So, Daniel, what's your attempted long shot?
Well, that was it. It was visual effects, for The Revenant, and I also might switch to The Revenant for sound mixing and/or editing. I think we still have those Guild Awards coming up, so I might defer to them. But in terms of the guilds, it's we can't always rely on them, because when guilds are voting for their winners, it's peer groups picking their peers. And when the Oscar voters are picking the winners, I mean, it's actors are voting for cinematography and visual effects and all these sort of things. Writers, producers, all of these other groups are voting for these categories. So it's not necessarily going to go to what the Guild goes for. I mean, just ask Roger Deakins how many Guild Awards equals 1 Oscar. Poor guy.
I did ask Roger Deakins recently, of course, who's got 13 losses in cinematography, and I asked him. And it was really, he was ticked off at the question. It was a tasteless question, but hey, what the hell? I had to ask it. I asked him, do you think you would have had a better chance of winning in the past if your name was on the ballot? Because remember, it's not in these below-the-line categories. And he kind of sat there and pondered. He said, I think I would have had a certainly better chance, yeah. It does seem ridiculous at the Oscars that only the actors get their names on the ballot. So, not even the directors. So the whole Oscar voting system, of course, is peculiar.
I would like to see all names in all categories. I mean, they take the time on the morning of the announcements to read them all out, as we well know.
Good point, Chris. Yeah.
So why not put them on a ballot? I think I know why. I've heard people talk about this, Academy officials. This is way, way back, but they just said, I mean, they have to put the actor's name on, obviously. Because you might have 2 or 3 actors from the same movie in a category. But they did not want what you're just saying. They wanted people to vote based on the merit of the work and not the names.
Well, except that's DiCaprio gives a great performance, but he's going to win because he's never won. Right? Paul Newman won for The Color of Money because he'd never won. Henry Fonda for On Golden Pond because he'd never won.
Right.
So,
and I think this also feeds into that kind of check mark mentality where if you really love The Revenant, then you're just going to check off the box every time. But if you hit cinematography and you saw Roger Deakins' name, you'd be like, okay, maybe I'd spread the wealth there a little bit. So we do get a little bit of a sweep mentality when you only have the name of the film.
Marcus, you're back. Finish your thought.
I'm having trouble. I was just going back to the visual effects thing. I don't think there's ever been 3 Best Picture nominees nominated. Usually there's only, there used to be only 2 or 3 nominees total. So I think that could split the vote if you're going with the Best Picture nominee has to win visual effects. So that's why I'm going with the Guild on that one. And also when you think back at all of these nominees, Chris is right that the bear scene is really impressive, but so was BB-8 from Star Wars. BB-8 was everywhere. He just exploded. And I know sometimes it's a practical prop, but a lot of the times it was a visual effect. So that was why I was going with that.
Speaking of those sound categories, I was curious to see at BAFTA that Revenant did win the sound category. Of course, they only have one there. They don't group them up. And I was talking with Jack Matthews a little bit ago, who's, as we all know, and I hope most of our listeners and viewers know, is really the reigning dean of Oscarologists. He's been the film editor of the LA Times, USA Today, New York Daily News. He's been on the beat forever, and he really knows his Oscars. And he's got Revenant for sound editing, but he's got Mad Max for sound mixing, and I forgot to ask him why.
That's what I have. We have 4 guilds still left, so we're all going to look at those, I'm sure.
So why do you split them up? They often go to the same movie.
I don't know.
That's not a good answer.
I think Mad Max will win mixing. It's got that, some really good, mixing that sometimes goes to musical-based things, and
yes,
I know this isn't a musical, but it's got the guitar guy, and it's got some music stuff in there that I think will. And then I just went with the Revenant because BAFTA did. But we've got a Sound Guild. I don't remember which one. This weekend we've got one. The next Saturday we've got makeup this weekend, and we've still got costume design during the week. So next week. So there's still 4 guilds. I'm interested to see what they do. If they just go.
All of which people can predict at Gold Derby.
Yeah, that's right. Win $100 Amazon gift card on any of those guilds. Plus, spirits are still left. Razzies, of course, the Oscars, and we'll launch Emmys soon. So you make a lot of money in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, let's wrap it up now. As final thoughts here, we will be back in a few days and run through the major categories. Don't worry, Derbyites, we're going to help you get those animated shorts and documentary short categories right. Those are the head scratchers, and you can win or lose or die based on those, of course. We have lots of thoughts on all of those races. But in the meantime, what a fun year. This has really been a blast. We'll catch you later. Giddy up.